Hey, do you want to sit there? Then, now, we are watching the documentary. Pay attention with questions, and then you have something to do with attention. Oh, yes,
I'm sorry, this makes no sense. I don't know, just like, give me more questions without playing. I think play.
You continue working on your pencil, right?
Yeah, it's okay. I know. The pencil okay.
Yeah. So when you are happy with your design, now, while we watch the documentary, okay, everybody, tonight time. The right printing of black and color white printing of the white. Now, let's start what we're learning. We are learning to understand textiles and the impact they have on the environment. We are looking at some sustainable practices being developed to reduce fashion waste. Yeah. So watch the video about the two sustainable fashion brands. Now we read the questions and supporting questions. Oh, you have to use words that you have to present the responses. You have to talk this one word, guys. That's not the thing. Well, Mr. Ryan will probably check. So if you want, we can do that together. It's easy for you. So let's just go through the questions so it's easier when we're there, okay? So we need to know what is junk textile. We need to know what to do with clothes. 3 things used to create design.
Not funny, alright.
Why is junk textiles more expensive? What products do they use for the extra material? How long have they been in business? And what does he do? Let's find out.
Oh, I thought it said what is mine made out of.
What?
His first sandal, so he made a sandal out of clothing.
What did the virgin do?
Love it. You can like have this.
The virgin.
I know.
I did it there. I did it. Oh, it's
That's not, is that from a template?
yeah.
Because that has like a coating, and that will come up and can get infected. So don't do that to yourself, but if you do it, you probably need to. Yeah. But don't do it, it's got to practice will be great.
So, I mean, rub it, something on it, and then like you'll stuff with it.
Yeah, you can burn it. Flame, and then you gotta wipe it with a alcohol. Yeah. Still, it's still gonna get affected. Alright, guys. Can we do that in
There was a way you can make that longer.
no, I know it's good for the but if I turn the screen, see if I can turn the screen that way without it falling off. Anyway, yeah. Apple?
Yeah.
All right, guys.
You're magic right now, sir. Sir, you're magic. You're with it.
Using up vast quantities of resources and
Alrighty.
the way you make textiles and what you do with the pollutants can often have a huge effect on how their production impacts on the environment. Coming up, we travel to Bangladesh's slums to discover just how polluting the textiles industry can be. We ask what different governments are doing to get the industry to clean up its act. Find out why building a £2 million water treatment plant is saving Axminster carpets a fortune. Welcome to Dhaka, capital of Bangladesh, and home to around 4 million textile workers. Low-cost labour has helped Bangladesh become one of the largest textile producers in the world. In fact, there's a pretty good chance that some of the clothes you're wearing right now were made there. With thousands of factories in
Buy sometimes close at Target, Kmart, or Big W.
I might make.
I have t-shirts from Kmart, they're all made in Bangladesh.
for millions of people across the country, textiles accounts for 80% of Bangladesh's exports, and the desire to develop often means environmental concerns don't make it up to the government's agenda.
When I ask the industrialist, the garment industry owner or the fabric dyeing owner, why do you don't set up EDP? They say there's a big competition in the international market. They always ask for cheap rate. So if we set up EDP, we won't be able to provide them cheap clothes. Then we'll lose our money. We will lose our business. They will go to the other country. That's why we don't set up EDP and we are polluting the environment.
Keeping textile factories running requires vast amounts of energy and resources. In Bangladesh, the industry is dominated by cotton, and turning each ton of cotton into finished fabric uses about 65,000 kilowatt hours of power and takes 250,000 litres of water. It's no surprise that almost 3/4 of the water is used for wet processes, things like washing, bleaching, and dyeing. With funds available to the government, meeting the water and power needs of Bangladesh's rapidly growing textiles industry is proving a major challenge. Most of Bangladesh's energy is generated by gas and coal-fired power stations, and that means that almost all the electricity used in the factories adds to pollution and CO2 emissions. Comes to water, Bangladesh might be one of the wettest countries in the world, but a lack of funds means the supply network is dilapidated. Factories often get priority over people, and as the textiles industry uses more water, an increasing number of people don't have access to supplies. As the textile industry continues to grow, the situation looks set to get worse. But water and energy use aren't the main reason textile production can impact on the environment. dyes to caustic soda and all sorts of alkalis and bleaches. Most of the wet processes in textile production involve potentially harmful chemicals. The result is that Bangladesh's textiles industries produced around 56 million litres of contaminated water a year. That's enough to fill 22,500 unexcised swimming pools. And if that water is allowed to leave the factory untreated, it can have a massive effect on the environment.
Okay, I did living there.
Hell no.
Yeah, a lot of people live there. I've travelled there, not there, but similar places. And but just how you, when you're born there,
So I'm saying people somewhere
it's very difficult.
There's more of them.
All right.
Nothing else with way too lazy to wait you.
This river runs through one of the main textile and tannery areas in Dhaka. It's one example of just how bad textiles pollution can get. Untreated waste from dyeing and washing processes flows freely from the factories, and that's not the only thing going straight into this river. If this film could convey the stench, you'd soon realise that this river is an open sewer. As a TV journalist, Shaheen is also aware of the consequences that this kind of pollution can have for people living downstream.
So it's a kind of the round area, the continuous process of this is circularly. But as there's some rickshaw puller and some they earn money from the waste material, selling the waste material. So they have the very limited income, so that they are bound to live here. But the environment is getting more day by day. This water was a kind of river water once after died, but now we see the color of the water is getting worse day by day. People, we can stop our children to swim in this water sometimes, and then they get sick. So that's the problem of staying here.
Of assessing water quality is by the amount of dissolved oxygen it contains. 8 to 9 milligrams per litre is the standard that's needed to support aquatic life. Around the textile zones, the levels frequently fall below 1 milligram per litre. That means these rivers are biologically dead. And it's not just water pollution that can impact on people's environments. Dyeing, bleaching, finishing processes can all release harmful gases. In Dhaka, these don't just affect the people working in the factories. The whole city's air quality suffers too. And with people often living in cramped conditions next to the factories, sometimes airborne pollution can have more serious consequences. Shaheen is following up rumours that a broken extractor has resulted in potentially lethal gases being pumped into the homes of 1,200 textile workers living above a dye house in Tejgaon in central Dhaka.
Okay, on the very early of the morning, there is a fire. We found that the bad smell, and the guys who were sitting were suddenly they get senseless there. And I was very shocked. I understand what happened. I see the boy is senseless. I went to him. Then I found the boy's wife is also senseless. Then I can understand what to do. Then I talked with the manager. Then I came back again. I saw my wife is senseless.
50 people were hospitalised as a result of the gas leak. Luckily, nobody died. But leaks like this are relatively rare, and it's not all bad news. As Bangladesh's textiles industry continues to grow, pressure from government, buyers, and consumers means many factory owners are reducing their impact on the environment. They're cutting down the amount of water and energy they use, phasing out harmful chemicals, and treating their waste before it leaves the factory. Nurul Haq is the operations director for Padma Dyeing and Weaving. Every month, this factory produces more than 22,000 kilometers of cotton fabric, enough to go more than halfway back. So whether it's laying hundreds of meters of wool yarn to the giant rolls, weaving on one of over 100 state-of-the-art electric looms, or washing, bleaching, or dyeing and finishing, everything they do here is on a pretty massive scale. It also means they use phenomenal amounts of water and energy to produce vast quantities, potentially polluting waste. But pressure from government suppliers means environmental concerns are becoming impossible to ignore.
Now nowadays, government girls take from the toilet and the other things from the fire. They are getting no water, no water because my they are asking and either we are safe. Hygiene system also, the health system also, everything they are checking. Where they are putting water.
To keep the inspectors happy, this company have invested in machinery. These rollers are one part of a continuous pad steam dyeing system that significantly reduced water and energy consumption. Dye is placed in tanks and padded onto the constantly moving fabric. This is then dried. Giant rollers like these before passing through a series of other padding baths containing alkalis and reducing agents. After steaming to fix the dye, the fabric is rinsed and oxidized before being dried. Continuous dyeing might not work on bumpy fabrics like corduroy, but for large quantities, it's much more efficient than batch techniques like jet dyeing. Working to capacity, machines like these can process 160 meters of fabric a minute. Not only are they more energy efficient than most batch dyeing techniques, but they use about 1/7 of the amount of water needed to operate jet machines. Of course, they might be using less energy and water, but what's left still contains a lot of different chemicals.
Wastewater, we are draining that one after dye. It's a mixture of dyes and chemicals such as sulfur oxide, particularly for the water side, wetting agent, some detergent, wetting agent, also sequestering agent, and some dye particles of jet oil. That's the main thing.
Not so long ago, the cocktail of chemicals coming out of the factory used to flow straight into the local canals and watercourses. But these days, it's a different story. This is the holding tank for Padma's Effluent Treatment Plant, or ETP for short. It was built in response to the government's Conservation Act. By law, large-scale polluters now have to have their own treatment plants. At Nurul's factory, all the wastewater, or effluent, is treated with carefully controlled amounts of chemicals. These cause dye and other particles to separate out in a thick sludge or crust. The treated effluent then passes through a series of settlement and aeration tanks. The result is clear water. It's not completely pure, but it is clean enough to meet government standards and can now be discharged into natural watercourses. To make sure it's working, the water's checked twice a day. But building and running treatment plants like this costs money, adding around 2p to every metre of fabric Padma produced. Fear of losing orders to cheaper competitors prevents many factory owners from installing ETPs. And until recently, it didn't really matter because the laws weren't enforced.
The civil society, the environmentalists, and the media, they have been fighting for this, asking government to compel the industrialists to sell ETP in their industry, there was a lot of litigation. The High Court ordered the government. So it is happening for years, but still those industrialists, they are not, installing the ETP. They say their production cost will go up. Some of them have installed it, but they don't use it because others, they are not using it. So they are, losing some money.
As the government begins to take some of the worst offenders to court, the hope is that Dhaka's rivers will begin to recover. But for cash-strapped governments, factory owners, and the millions of employees making textile products all over the developing world, the real question is, who should foot the bill?
I would say to the consumer from the developed world, they are polluting our environment so that they can get their clothes in cheap rate. I have seen in West, they do care for their environment. They keep their river clean, they keep their environment clean, so they do care for their environment. But it is not fair if they don't care for our environment. So I must say, those people, they should take the responsibility. They should care for our environment as well. They should pay for our environment, safety of our environment.
Whilst consumers, buyers, and factory owners haggle over who should pay, fragile environments all around the globe remain under threat. But as the cost of water, power, and waste disposal continue to rise, some textile producers are discovering that reducing their impact on the environment could actually save them money. Locating a spinning and dyeing plant in a national park might not sound like a great idea. But when Axford's Carpets bought this site, environmental laws barely existed, and being next to the River Darn meant there was loads of water for turning fleeces into dyed yarns ready for weaving carpets. Because wool starts life on the back of a sheep, when it gets here, it contains pesticides, fleas, and all sorts of other things. And that means every fleece has to be washed, bleached, and rinsed using detergents and other chemicals. It's a process called scouring. Once the fleeces have been twisted and spun to make yarn, the next step is dyeing. Lengths of wool called hanks are hung on racks and then lowered into giant baths of near boiling dye. Between scouring and dyeing, every day this factory uses about 400,000 litres of water. But that also means they produce nearly 400,000 litres of waste, full of dyes, chemicals, and other pollutants. And until recently, they had to pay twice to dispose of every single litre. As well as the treatment plant on site, they also had to pay the local sewage company to treat the waste again. Nowadays, it's a different story.
It's something actually started to very proud of. It's not wastewater that it comes from the dying and scouring of the plant. And so what that does is it goes through an ultrafiltration process and then a reverse osmosis process.
Sophie O'Callaghan is the Sustainable Energy Manager for Axford's Carpets. Her goal is to reduce the company's carbon emissions by 20%. And this £2 million water treatment plant is all part of the plan. You can't see it, but inside these tubes, thousands of litres of water is being continually cleaned without adding chemicals. Ultrafiltration, or UF for short, is the first part of a two-stage water treatment process.
This is our UF membrane. Obviously, all your dirty water is going up the tubes, pushes out, and all your clean water stays on the outside rims of the glass. Obviously, you've got like a space there. So there's 40,000 litres going through the middle, and 10,000 litres of clean water on the outside that you force out. Stuff in the middle, the 40,000 that's left is just being recycled going round and round and round. And it's like a back system. So all day you're just filling and emptying it all at the same time. And at the end of the run, you start back to the tank, you get toothpicks to go through the machine.
Ultrafiltration removes all the suspended solids, but it can't get rid of colours. So to get the water to a standard where it can be discharged, it has to go through another filtration process called reverse osmosis.
So if all three comes into reverse osmosis, which is down in a diode, and that's just all suspended solids around it, so you always know it's just a colour. Obviously, this machine takes a colour. Works on the same principle as the US, forcing it through the membrane, one into the middle, carbonate clean in the middle, and which is where a sample can make clean now.
Rather than throwing all this clean water away, the clever bit about this plant is that it pumps it into storage tanks so it can be reused the next day. It saves Axman's the carpets a fortune because they don't have to pay to take water out of the river or to dispose of waste.
The permit here allows the site to discharge 400 litres a day of contaminated water to sewer. So that would have required a similar figure to have been taken out of the river. Now that the treatment plant is in place, there's only actually a very small proportion discharged to site, and because 95% or more of the water is actually reused in the dye house and other processes on site, the only water required is that small percentage to top it back up. So it's a small fraction of the use on a daily basis.
As an environment officer, part of Spence's job is to check the systems companies have in place to make sure they're meeting the legal requirements. Most of his job involves working with businesses, developing strategies that reduce carbon emissions and make them more sustainable in the long term.
The regulations here are drawn up at the European level. They require companies to go through the can and apply what we call BAT, which is best available techniques. So they are required to reference at European level. It's the best thing they can do to reduce the water consumption. It's the best thing they can apply in a dye house to maximise efficiencies and energy efficiencies. So to some extent, it's dictated to both the company and ourselves. And our job is to make sure that they are applying those best techniques as much as they can.
And building and running the treatment plant hasn't just reduced the amount of water needed. Because it's treated on site and stored in insulated tanks, the recycled water reaches the dye house. It's already at 40 degrees. But that's dramatically reduced the amount of energy used to heat it up.
Coming out of the dye mat, that's coming out at 98 degrees, so very close to boiling. That's all going straight down the drain, effectively. Now that water goes back into the process, so we're getting nice hot water back. So we're starting our dyeing at a fixed temperature and saving a lot of energy there.
The dye house might still be the biggest energy consumer on the site, but after the hunks have been dyed, they have to be washed and then dried, and that uses a lot of energy too. As well as improving insulation on the ovens, Sophie and her team are looking at ways of recovering heat from the dye house and using that for heating the ovens. But that's not the only way Sophie's hoping to reduce energy consumption on site.
We've got cultural events, campaigns for staff, get them engaged, get them turning off the lights and thinking about what they can be doing. Looking at energy efficient lighting techniques, possibly installing solar panels if we can, getting our energy from renewable sources like the solar panels, like a renewable boiler.
Combining all these measures with the savings from the new treatment plant means Sophie's well on track to meet a 20% target. It also means that people who live and work here can make the most of being in a national park. And cutting energy consumption and recycling wastewater isn't the only way Axminster carpets are reducing their impact on the environment.
Okay, tell me something.
Bangladesh, yeah. Like fabric spots, very fast, and now it is expected to be.
Yeah, exactly. exactly, like very fast, very cheap. I wouldn't disagree with that. I wouldn't mind. No, guys, this is probably not the right video. You know what I mean? It's just not about going to textiles. We noticed that. Right. Good morning, guys. You're doing an awesome job.
The Axstone 65 the carpets. The idea wasn't just to have the authority under the carpet, but more importantly, to make it boyz free from actors. From here, right answers to each other. So it's not they want to create this material. This is using your punching machine. For extra comfort, more layers of wasteful around it. To work into capacity, this spindle line will reprocess half a ton of waste fibers an hour. The plant's been so successful that Axminster have had to start sourcing wasteful fibers from other producers. We're able to